reads, what is your position on the war on drugs? And do you think it should be changed? How should we combat the use of drugs, and should marijuana be legalized? And Anna, you are first out of the box on this one. 2 minutes.
Thanks, Scott. I'm looking forward to answering this question. I think that we should legalize all drugs in this country. We speak about liberty in this country. We should have the liberty to make choices for ourselves, especially if those choices do not harm other people. So if I decide that I want to shoot heroin, okay, which I don't, I have no interest in that. And by the way, if we legalized heroin, I'm pretty sure the majority of people in this room would say, hey, I'm going to go try heroin today. If we legalized drugs like marijuana, drug cartels in Mexico would lose a tremendous amount of power. We are fueling a drug war that is very quickly. During the Nixon administration, he had commissioned a study, and he had Governor Schaefer. It was known as the Schaefer Report. And he had him do a study on marijuana to see whether or not it's actually harmful to the human body, whether or not it'll be harmful to society. Well, the outcome of that study was that it was not harmful. And Nixon took that study, ripped it up, and said, no, I'm going to keep it illegal because of the fact that I believe it's immoral, right? At that time, you know, think about the people that make money off enforcing these drug laws. And now it's kind of turned into this huge issue where you have private prisons making money off of this, okay? You have the DEA, I mean, they get to enforce these drug laws. You have private contractors in Mexico trying to fight this war on drugs. Their pockets are getting fat. So this is a real problem, and we need to end it.
Okay, great. Yes, you know, libertarians like to talk about the drug issue, of course. I do agree with Anna on most of what she did have to say. I did forget to preface this debate by stating that my opinion is my own and do in no way represent our organization. So while we get on this touchy subject, I can go whole hog now. Yes, I also believe that we should legalize all drugs for moral reasons and for ethical reasons and for efficiency reasons. Thank you. There's something very interesting. I want you guys all to use your phones right now and Google. Look up the federal patent on the medical use of marijuana. Did you know that the federal government actually owns the patent? The day that drugs are legalized, you can bet that the federal government is going to be in there to get their chink. And we tried prohibition before in the United States. You remember, we tried to ban alcohol. And we saw what a disastrous social policy that was, what a progressive social policy it was. Remember, this was the progressive reformers, what were they, the votes, the suffragettes, who brought with us temperance with the right to vote.
Yeah. What's the deal with that?
Prohibition is a totally failed policy. It never worked. You cannot legislate morality. Now people say, well, what about people who go on coke binges and then they go and they harm other people? Yeah, you don't have a right to go and do something and put something in your body and go and harm other people. But what we don't need, and I even got Sarah Palin to admit this on our show on Fox, that the government has no business breaking into pot smokers' basements and arrest them and take them to jail. So I mean, if people like Sarah Palin and Austin Petersen and Anna Kasparian, we'll see where JP comes in on this one, we can possibly get together on this. And I think it's time that we legalize drugs and the war on drugs now.
Cheers to that.
Yeah, I think I should tell you that open use of alcoholic beverages in a public place is not permitted on campus.
So we have pro-visit fascists!
That said, and I pretty much agree with everything that Austin just said, and I would say that the way that this is perpetuated, I mean, talk about prisons, the way that prisons currently are, I mean, you know, I actually don't know very much about privatized prisons. I just know that state-run prisons aren't so good either. I hear about ways in which we're saving money. I don't know, maybe we need to spend a little bit more. We do need to get more people out of prisons. We do need to decriminalize certain behaviors just because the extent to which we have authorized and legitimated savagery inside a prison, the things that people do to each other in these places, and the way that they are no longer able to reintegrate into society is a major problem. We are no longer interested in rehabilitation, we're just punishing. And that is a big problem. But I want to just play devil's advocate because I mostly agree, although with the hard drugs I do have one question, which was, do either of you believe that someone should be able to sell themselves into slavery?
No, I believe that's an invalid contract.
Okay, wait until rebuttal.
Okay.
See
But
what you're-
the reason I say this is that when you do a highly addictive drug like heroin, you enter into a contract with that drug. You are no longer able to have autonomy. It really does take over your life. Now, I mean, there are ways that we alleviate that, for instance, with treatment centers and things like that. But I think that's the major issue with hard drugs, and that's why, you know, during one of the debates when Ron Paul said that he's totally cool with legalizing heroin, there's an issue there, which is that while people are still under the influence of this drug and they're constantly being drawn towards doing whatever they can to get this drug, they're going to wind up harming other people.
So tobacco and alcohol are the most addictive drugs there are.
Wait. Okay, finish up. You got it.
But to some extent, they are mind altering, and well, tobacco less so, but with alcohol, we do have certain restrictions on that too, and how you use it, right? For instance, if there's a certain extent to which you have gotten drunk, you're no longer allowed to drive. If you are drunk to a certain point in public, you're going to get fined or something like that. We will find some way to regulate it. I think that there are other ways to deal with that, but there's no, you're only a little bit doped up on heroin. There's just no way to do that. So that's sort of the issue that I just want to bring up.
Okay, let's just stop right there. We're going to go to 3 minutes of rebuttal, but I want to inform the speakers that after this rebuttal, we're going to go to closing arguments, of which you'll each have 3 minutes, and we'll begin that with JP. But now let's have 3 minutes of rebuttal on the war on drugs.
Thank you. I just wanted to jump in with a great case study, and that would be Portugal. Because in Portugal, they legalized all drugs. They had a problem with addiction in the country, and they focused on decriminalizing the drugs. And if someone is addicted, they had programs available to help those individuals rather than just locking them up, and then they become repeat offenders. So drug rates actually went down. I wish I had the numbers in front of me, but I highly recommend that you guys check it out. Because at the end of the day, I mean, drug use is a victimless crime. No one gets hurt other than the person who makes that decision to take the drugs. And I think through education, which we did a great job with the tobacco industry, people can make informed decisions. I'm not saying that these drugs aren't harmful. Heroin is horrible. Cocaine, all of these drugs, they do horrible damage to your body, but so does alcohol. And why is it that alcohol is legal, but drugs like marijuana are illegal? So we really have to ask ourselves those questions. And I feel like the majority of people are in agreement anyway.
But doctors, remember, doctors don't prescribe alcohol. They do prescribe heroin. And sometimes that form of heroin, they prescribe opiates. And they prescribe opiates, and they do actually prescribe cocaine in certain uses. So why is it that the only legal drugs are the most dangerous ones? Why is it that the government says that it's okay for you to get high on this drug that will kill you, absolutely, but it's not okay for you to go and smoke a plant that doesn't harm anyone? Yeah. Right. Most people who die in this country from drug overdoses, people who die in this country from drug overdoses, the majority of people who die, they die from legal drugs. So, you have to take everything into perspective. But, tobacco, alcohol, like these are the drugs that people need to have, an idea of what the real health effects are. Those are the real deleterious drugs. Yeah, so, I mean, legalize it. Don't criticize it.
Well, I mean, first off, I am glad to hear that there are restrictions on the open use of alcohol on this campus. It must not happen anywhere. So I'm really glad to hear that you guys have locked that down and that you got that in shape. But I think another thing, it's related to what Austin was saying. It's just something to put in the back of your mind and something to think about. Is that a lot of people who do a lot of drugs, a lot of them, they just do a lot. Part of the reason that they're doing this is because they're also self-medicating. It's because there are stigmas against mental illness and actually getting that stuff treated. Alcoholism, you don't actually. Somebody just pointed to her friend, and I thought that was hysterical. Like, yeah, he has a problem. But the point there being that the way in which we deal with the drug issue, it's related to a bunch of other issues. Mental health issues are completely neglected in this country. Look at the populations that suffer the worst of it. They have the most stigmas against actually getting stuff treated. So you start to cure those issues, you start to deal with a lot of the problems that we're having that results in us needing a drug war. Just something to think about.
Yes, real quick, drugs are a medical problem. They're not a criminal problem. You can't keep drugs out of prisons. How are you going to keep them out of schools?
Well, they can become a criminal problem, which was my point. That
well, they can, but I mean, people who are addicted to drugs, they have a medical problem. Throwing them in prison usually means that they're going to get more drugs, and they're going to become hardened criminals. People who come into the system who are nonviolent drug offenders, they learn how to commit crimes when they get into prison. So nonviolent drug offenders right away should absolutely be released from our prison because they've harmed no one. And when you look at the harder drugs, people who are addicted to harder drugs don't need to be thrown in a jail cell. They need to go to rehab. So why wouldn't you take the money that you're going to use to put these people in jail and use it for rehab instead? And private prisons aren't the problem, ladies and gentlemen, by the way. Private prisons do not cause more criminals. Bad laws cause criminals. Remember,
this is the part where we start talking about the law.
I have to jump in. One last thing, just because I really have to do it. Private prisons lobby to pass laws that are tough on drugs. So as a libertarian, if you are against the criminalization of drugs, you cannot be in favor of private prisons because they have a profit motive to lock up as many people as possible.
People lobby all the time. That's free speech. But it's not the problem of the lobbyists. The problem is with the law. It's the lawmakers that is. I can lobby all day long and say, I need a tariff, I want a tariff, and it happens. But when the law is passed, it's not the person who lobbied for it that's the problem, it's the person who passed the law.
Money corrupts politics. Let's keep it real. Money corrupts politics. At the end of the day, if you have corporations, if you have private prisons funding the campaigns of politicians, do you think that politicians are self-righteous enough to say, no, I am not going to take that money and I am not going to allow that to influence my vote? It's happening today.
Perhaps we should limit the power of politicians so that when people lobby them, they can't do all that much.
Exactly. Yeah. If the wasn't spending $2 trillion a year, then there would be no reason for them to come there. If there was no money flowing through the spigot, the lobbyists wouldn't come to snap it up. They go there because they're getting more money than they're paying in. So you talk about big money. The big money is the $2 trillion that the Congress is spending. It's way bigger than the budget of any corporation.
I'm sending smoke signals, Tonto style.